And now let's go to the last block that is split to two parts, and this is split also by a coffee break. This is about ecosystem services. The first part is mainly about ecosystem services themselves and their assessment methods. The second is about approaches, how to include also how to be more participatory, etc. And Jan Frouz, he didn't wait for me to invite him, so you know that you have a limited time. Jan, floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you for introduction, and I will be speaking for the very basis of ecosystem services. You know, we just when we're speaking about ecosystem services, we basically speak about money and the benefit for mankind, but we have to keep in mind that these ecosystem services didn't appear from nowhere. They are actually outcome of ecosystem processes, and when we're speaking about nature protection, you know, there is long debate if we should more focus on species or if we should more focus on processes. As far as I was able to listen to today's presentation, you know, this was basically almost entirely focused on species and driven by belief that if we focus on species, the processes somehow, you know, miraculously appear by themselves. There are examples when the ecosystem services really closely depend on natural species, like this bacteria living in the hot springs in Yellowstone. They produce unique, you know, enzymes which can be used in multiplication of DNA, and now we use that ability to catch mass murders and produce, you know, new crops, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business. But these are quite rare examples if we have some new genes, you know, so we can look on the nature as a pool of new genes. But most of the ecosystem services actually we are speaking about, like flood protection, you know, climate regulation, all that kind of services, they actually depend on ecosystem processes. And when we speak about ecosystem processes, we usually don't use units like, you know, number of species. We speak about energy in watts, we speak about matter in kilograms, you know, transition of those per unit of time. And, you know, here in that, here in that graph, you actually see, you know, energy budget of the Earth. And you basically can see that from this like 160 plus watt energy, which is coming to the Earth's surface, maybe 2 watts is used by photosynthesis. And this 2 watts is all what feed all the species we have. Yeah? So all the species deal with this 2 watts. And the rest actually is related to other biophysical processes. It doesn't mean the species doesn't play the role. The species actually affect how much water we transpire, and this affects proportion of this 17 and 80 watts. Yeah? If we have deserts, we have no plants, most of that will turn to sensible heat. If we have a lot of plants, most of that will be transpired, but it depends more on mass of the plants than really species. The species are behind somewhere, but we have very little understanding how the species are related to these actual processes. This is one example on the left side. You know, this is a famous experiment when the people plant sites with different diversity, and you can see very nice results, which is often mentioned in, you know, nature protection textbook. And if you have more species, we have more productivity. But in reality, this is more sampling effect, because most species in nature are rare species. They never reach huge productivity. Only few species have ability to really dominate community. And more species we include, the larger the chance we would have this species. This most productive species is actually those which are used in agriculture. Yeah? So this, in that terms, you know, monoculture communities will be as productive as a diverse community. What is actually a big difference if we look on the monoculture over time, and if we do not supply nutrients and, you know, other care, the productivity will decrease, while in natural communities which have multi-species, productivity will increase because species can cooperate. So the added value actually here is not productivity, but the long-term stability. And if you look, for example, in the greenhouse gas regulation, you know, there is some amount done by very strong geological processes which regulate Earth climate for millions of years, but in terms of contemporary global warming, they are negligible. And then there is, you know, water circulation in ocean, and then there is soil and biomass, which actually, you know, affect about 29%, absorb actually 29% of anthropogenic addition of CO2. And this is really important because this we can affect by our management. The other parts, you know, we cannot affect so much by our management. And I will just give you two examples of our research in the LIFE project here, how this nature protection affect biophysical processes or ecosystem processes and consequently ecosystem services and how that relates to biodiversity. So the first case study I'm going to speak about is a simple question. If the protected meadows store more carbon than conventionally managed meadows? And to cut long story short, the answer is yes. Protected meadows store more carbon, and this is also context dependent, so dry meadows store more carbon than particularly mesic ones, and also the effect of protection is the highest here. However, overall, there is no much relationships with biomass. There is some relationship with plant biomass in managed meadows, but there is no relationships with biomass in protected meadows. And to make things even more confusing, there is no relation to plant biodiversity. So we cannot say that more diverse meadows store more carbon. If you look on the plant traits, there is also some relationship with plant traits in cultural meadows, in managed meadows. So in managed meadows, it actually depends more on plant species traits, but in protected meadows, not so much. What actually is a big difference is that there is much less disturbance in protected meadows. So in culturally managed meadows, we actually renew meadows every 7 to 15 years, we plow it, and this reduces carbon stock, and then we re-establish it. We don't do that in a protected meadows in a such extent, so basically the meadows carbon have more time to reach its saturation. So we can summarize it like this. So in cultural meadows, we have these, you know, waving stock of carbon. Each tillage we lose some carbon. Before we saturate, we lose again, you know. And in protected meadows, the meadows have more time to reach more carbon. I can go more into mechanisms in detail if you would be interested in discussion. But basically, it's a byproduct of management, how we approach the protected meadows, but it's not really a direct consequence of diversity. They might be indirect consequence of diversity because I already say diverse meadows are more stable in their production. So even before these meadows were protected, because being more diverse, the farmers have less incentive to till them because the production was still sustainable. So there might be some linkage, but these linkages are not really kind of straightforward. Another case study I'm going to demonstrate is the effect of vegetation on water cycle. You know, if we speak about water cycle, most people say, the water rain, go to the rivers, then to sea. That's certainly true, but it's only a very small fraction of true. If you think about the fate of the water which rain, most of that water, actually 2/3, finish with soil, and the plant will evaporate that back. Only a small fraction go to the rivers and become part of visible water. Most of the water which move in the ecosystem you never see. And so we are focusing on that particular water. And so we have a very simple question, and we ask the question if the trees, which really needs more water to operate, if their support formation of soil which store more water, and vice versa. Okay, so to answer that question, we have several indications from our previous research. It might be so, because we know that some plants which grow faster presumably needs more water. They produce soil with higher carbon content, and higher carbon content means you store more water in soil, which we can measure. And so basically to measure this more directly, we actually use this sophisticated device by which we measure amount of water which has been transpired by individual trees, how much water tree use for growth, and we measure how much water the soil can hold, soil under that trees, and how much water also infiltrates to that soil, doesn't run off when it's raining. And to do so, we actually choose post-mining sites. The reason why we do that was that this was the first generation of tree that grow there. So we can say that soil properties are exclusively affected by that tree species and not really by long-term legacy of soil development. And again, we have different tree species. We have here alder, oak, and spruce. And to cut long story short, the data support our original hypothesis. So we can say the broadleaf trees, which actually, consume more water for their growth, they actually also produce soil, which is able to hold more water for their supply. So more raining water will infiltrate to soil, less will run off, and more will be retained by soil. And it can be consequently used by plants. And this makes sense because spruce naturally is a mountain tree, so there was not really, their rainfall was high, so there wasn't really intention to keep water because that, fungal diseases and all that would be actually more kind of cost than benefit of this water. On the other hand, for broadleaves, this was really essential. And this has many practical implications. In Czech Republic, we have many spruce monocultures, and they are now suffering from global warming and drying out. And we can actually see that if we plant, spruce in lowlands 100 years ago, the next spruce generation will suffer not only that, but will also suffer the soil which previous spruce generation prepared for them, which, is able to kind of retain much less water than the previous soil generation, which the fourth generation of spruce inherited from broadleaf forest. And this is many other practical implication of that. So if I should conclude, there is some relationships between species and ecosystem services. For example, trees support formation of water, the water holding capacity that's suited to them, and the keeping close to natural vegetation may actually produce more sustainable water cycle. Protected meadows store more carbon, but the relationships with management is more complex than just diversity. And there will be other examples like that. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I will be open for questions.
Thank you, Jan, for this introductory presentation, because I think those examples are really very good starting point for discussion of ecosystem services approach. So questions from your side? Everything was clear? Yeah, really? Okay.
Wasn't enough inspirative.
No, I think it was. They just need to digest it. Marta. But we need a microphone for you because we have a... But this is for interpreters. This is, if someone uses headphones.
Yeah, so my question regards the last part of the presentation, when you said that you have a problem with spruce monocultures because the same we have in Poland. But as I understood, we risk that when we plant broadleaf trees, on the soil that was previously under the spruce, we risk that they will not be able to get enough water because soil is. I wanted to make sure that I understood correctly. So what can we do to reshape the forest in a way that will be effective?
Yeah. So basically, this is a little bit more difficult question, more complex question, but most broadleaf trees we use in the forestry are climax trees. So you would have difficulties to plant the trees if you clear cut the spruce forest, and if you want to plant the trees like beech or oak, you certainly would have big difficulties to do so. So there is one possibility: you plant them under the spruce forest before you will clear cut, or if you already have these open areas, like we have huge open areas after bark beetle attacks, there is very convenient approach. You can use pioneer species. Yeah, so there is pioneer species of trees like birch, aspen, goat willow, and these species actually can grow in open spaces. They are very well suited for harsh microclimatic conditions once they establish, and they actually produce, this initial layer of leaf litter, which, improve physical conditions, but also produce mycorrhizae, which can help establish late succession species. So basically, if you already have open area, the using pioneer species is, from my perspective, probably the best solution you can have.
Thank you, Jan. I don't see any other question, so thank you once again for your presentation. Let's continue. The next presentation is New Ecosystem Services Assessment Methodology and Web Tool for Bridging Science and Practice, and the speaker will be Kateřina Mácová from Charles University.
Thank you. So within the Project One Nature, we were responsible for socio-economic assessment of the effects of the project, and also we built something new. As the presentation says, just to bridge the gaps between science and practice in the area of ecosystem services. So. We built guidelines, and these are accompanied with a web tool where you can calculate the results and see the results in some specific area. And also there is another part of text that accompanies the web tool where you can find, you will be able to find once accomplished, because the web tool is to be done by the end of this year, so this doesn't exist in its entirety yet. There will be some more information about the data, about the models, the theory behind, and so on. Yeah, so these are two interconnected results of the project. And speaking about the guidelines, they also have like two parts. Once we were starting to deal with the topic, we focused on like how to define this field, because the field of ecosystem services is so complex, and there is not one terminology that you can use. There's a wide diversity of approaches in the literature, and also in the Czech Republic we have a very vast amount of methodologies that touch this area, either that doesn't matter. First of all, we try to be very clear about what the terminology can mean, what's the examples of like ecosystem service assessment can look like, so that the practitioners actually can look and see whether there is something that fits their purpose, because there are so many purposes that you can look, so many research questions that you can ask, that this concept can actually actually answer. Yeah, so this is like a broader part, terminological part, conceptual part, and then we have the computational part, which is innovative in the way that it is not ecosystem service mapping. It is something new. It builds on a theory of natural capital and its evaluation from economics. Yeah, so this is a dynamic model, bioeconomic model. So this is something new that my colleague actually will talk about within this presentation, and it means that it is more suitable for really describing what happens in the nature, what happens within the nature and the socio-economic system, and still it enables us to end in something which is really easy to use, easy to interpret, and it brings the result back to some monetary index that is combining several ecosystem services and is relatable to some area of ecosystem. Yeah, so this is the main idea. And there are very many target users. We have, of course, the main ones within the project. It is Ministry of Environment of the Czech Republic and Nature Conservation Agency, which are our project partners. But we think that many other interested bodies and fields of expertise can actually build on this project and move it forward, because the project we had was really short to build something really big. So this is maybe innovative, but also it is an entry point to something that can be established into more detail in future. Yeah. So. The prerequisites also built on the project framework. We don't build the tool and the methodology only for the Natura 2000, but for the whole landscape, because the types of land use overlap within these two, luckily. So it will be really relevant for many more things than management of Natura 2000. And we built on the user requirements, the strategic documents that we have in the Czech Republic, but also abroad. And the current practice, as I said, there are so many existing tools on ecosystem services in the European Union, in the USA, also in the Czech Republic. So we tried to put these all into one, hopefully comprehensive text. And also, the last point, from the beginning I was thinking about how to integrate the results into decision-making. So not like on the broad level, but into very specific agendas, administrative agendas that the nature conservation authorities deal with. Yeah, so this was also from the beginning of how to shape the methodology. And concerning the computational part, there are two levels. One general model, which is really like general equations, and then application modules, which talk about some specific ecosystem services. Yeah, and this is like the basic model which stems from the economic theory of natural capital. So we have the social utility, which is actually connected to the ecosystems and their components, like the ecosystem assets, by three main ways. Through the processes that Professor Frouz just talked about, they create some ecosystem output, some ecosystem services, let's say. People also are important because they co-create these services. When you have recreational services, they wouldn't exist without the people. Yeah, so there's some co-production of these services in the green area. And then there are some non-use values. Even if you don't use the nature and you really like don't interact with it, you can have some values in mind that relate to the ecosystem and the ecosystem assets. And then there is a third link through the actually economy. Yeah, so they affect economic output. So this all is in the mind of the natural capital approach, and there is some way how to calculate the shadow price of the ecosystem. ecosystems. And this is my last slide. I will give floor to Jan Melichar, and he will talk about one of the modules, first ecosystem models, that is created to the end of this project. And actually we chose forest because not only this type of biotope forms 1/3 of the area of the Czech Republic, but also forests are the type of ecosystem with most readily available data, and the data are really representative and of good quality, and for other ecosystems we don't have such data. So this can be like a pilot if we have really good data what we can achieve, and if we find something interesting, then maybe the next step can be, well, it would be nice to have such data collected for other types of ecosystems which are not now available. Yeah, so here about the web tool.
Hello everybody, I'm Jan Melichar, and as Kateřina spoke, according to the economic theory of capital, we consider the ecosystem as natural productive assets. You can imagine that ecosystem components such as timber production, or timber biomass, then animals, protected species, but also soil components, namely nutrients, carbon in soil, carbon water, can directly or indirectly enter into the economic system, into the social utility function. So what matters when valuing the economic assets? So that is space and time dimension, because the ecosystems dynamically evolve in time, and also the ecosystem services and the benefits. And there are the interactions between the components in the ecosystem. What matters further is if and how large the ecosystem is harvested or depleted, not only now, but also in the future. And what is further important, how the ecosystem components enter into the social utility function, and it could be in 3 ways. It was presented by Kateřina. So we are aware that this approach is quite complex. So we intend, on one hand, to have a scientific justified approach, and at the same time, on the other hand, we would like to have an approach that is applicable to protection agencies. And so the result is a standardized value of the ecosystem, so-called scheduled price per hectare of a given ecosystem type. And the reason is that is one applicable measure, and we not need other further indicators or measurement in another units. So the methodological approach consists of 3 consecutive steps. The first is building the ecological model that capture all the interactions, all the components, and further to have interconnection of the ecological part with the economic model that is represented by harvesting technology, management type, and also, as I have mentioned, how the ecosystem services enter to the utility or to the economic part. It could be directly, indirectly, and as anonymous values. And the third step is choosing the appropriate discount rate and calculate the standardized value. We are aware that this approach is very complex, and the result is a standardized equation of shadow price of the ecosystem. You can see it, but it's very simple. It consists in the first term, in the numerator, these are the changes in direct benefits of ecosystem flows. That is adjusted by the second part, second term, by anticipated price changes, that is scarcity phenomenon, not now, but also in the future. It could be like the investment in habitat restoration, and you can derive future benefits from this investment. And then divided by discount rate, that is intertemporal preference of the people consume now or consume in the future. Then we are aware that this approach is, or the bioeconomic model is very complex. So we constructed the web application that should easily allow users to derive the standardized value per a given ecosystem type. And that is programming in R with Shiny package. And now I will show you one simple example of economic value of forest ecosystems. So we intended to derive the economic benefits that includes benefits from timber and carbon sequestration, and we simulated the effect on the rotation period of the forest stand as a management indicator. The simulation were based on forest growth model, mixed spruce fir beech forest stand that was parameterized for the Central Europe with climate parameters. Then we consider different carbon pools in the forest, namely living biomass with roots, also the then organic matter and hardwood products in the economy. We omit for now soil carbon, but it's very important pool. Then the initial data were derived from the Czech National Forest Inventory, and we also parameterized the future and the growth of the forest by climate scenario, shared socio-economic pathway that develop, for example, air temperature in different ways. So you can see the structure according to climate vegetation zones, and also because we need some shadow price of carbon, so we use the social cost of carbon that was predicted according to this scenario by the integrated assessment model GIF. So you can see the time evolution of the price of carbon and also air temperature that enter into growth model. So here are the results. What matters, and statistically is significant. The difference is that economic value of forest stand differ according to discount rate, then applied benefits that forest owner can consider when make forest management. So if we consider only timber profits, net profits, or carbon sequestration, and also when we consider the both. And these are the effects that affect not only economic value, but also carbon storage, and also the rotation period in the forest. What matters further is climate vegetation zones, attitude zones. Also, it influences the economic value, and further, the projection of the climate and the projection of shadow price of carbon.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was about what you will find in the web tool concerning the forest. And now I have some more slides, but I will just shortly skip through them because we are running out of time. But we did also some digging into the administrative practices with actual environmental lawyers, because I kept asking the questions about how to use ecosystem services as a concept in the practice, and the question is so general, and there is so many studies that try to answer this question, but they don't actually. And even when they are focusing on one specific agenda, like EA, they don't get much further. So I just tried to bring some very specific arguments how ecosystem services valuation or assessment, if we are talking about biophysical terms, have to look like so that it fits somewhere, so that we are bridging the gap, which is still very, very large. Yeah, so I will just skip through this. Those are the agendas that we focused on. So this will be part of the methodology, some selected outputs, and actually the key findings say that in the current legal practice of the Czech Republic there are some key intersections of the ecosystem service concept. It is actually very interesting that forest law, which is not like the resort of the environment, but of agriculture, because we have big resortism about the nature management in here. So they actually entered the term itself into law, but this is very new, so we will be very waiting for what this will do. But actually, the term appears also in the law on conservation of nature and landscape, which is the domain of the Ministry of Environment. Actually, the possibilities now are really limited, because the legislation does not preclude it, it doesn't ban it, but generally is very unsupportive. Yes, you have to really actively find some very specific links to push it forward, and actually the focus in many times does not match. So it is really not so straightforward even now, after, I don't know, 20 years of ecosystem services research. So we discuss some ways forward in the methodology, which is really focused on ecosystem services from a more broader perspective, include also the functions, not only the services, let's say also the processes that are inherent, but if you don't analyze them, they don't appear themselves out of nowhere, as Professor Jan Frouz has correctly said. And the first thing to do could be check the criteria that are present in many of these administrative agendas, and through the lens of the ecosystem services concept, try to check whether everything is present, everything should be present, is it all there? Are there some new, perhaps, indicators that could help measure the things that are to be measured? And just to note, actually the scientific debate now circles about for several times in a row from the very beginning of the development of the concept, that it is actually needed to have a plurality of indicators and metrics. Yeah, so one value in economic terms, in money, is not enough, will never be enough. Yeah, so maybe this is just where I will end. And actually, in the end of the methodology, we just still put really big emphasis on the precautionary principle, which actually covers still the questions. We know that in the strategies we say that we have to work with the ecosystem services concept and so on, but the question still is where it should be really applied, and we have to be talking about very specific cases, not just broadly. Yeah, so further development is still needed, but we believe in the respect of bridging the gap. We stepped a bit forward. Yeah, so I will end here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and we have a comment rather than a question, because this is from Jan Frouz. But we need a microphone for you. Again, because of interpreters.
I think it's very important to include this scarcity concept in your model. I mean, when the ecosystem become more rare, the value they provide might be more valuable. However, in economy, we see that we can apply this small change approach. Yeah, somebody say Hormuz will open next day, and oil prices go down, and it doesn't open and go up again. So the economy react very quickly on those. But in ecosystem services, we often see that the people believe the business as usual will continue for unlimited time, and then when we reach certain tipping point, the things become order of magnitude more valuable. So are you able to kind of capture these tipping points with the model?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Thank you. No, actually, there are, there are very vast limits in the science, and that's why I didn't talk about it. But that's why, actually, in some of the agendas that we went through, which is like a balancing of competing interests, whether to have the open landscape or whether to build somewhere in there, and so on. What I'm talking about. Well, actually, I think after reading how the praxis works and after knowing where the science is, I think to push this forward so that we can help the nature and not the competing interests which generate, the GDP and the employment and these very important things. We can also build on the previous steps of the proportionality tests, which is based on certainties, yeah, and which is based on that some changes are really irreversible, and we cannot capture it by the models. And this is not the problem of ecosystem services, but this is the problem of the sciences that enter into it. Yeah. So this is not something that is created and lives with the concept and is not present anywhere else. This is what has been there for some times before and what will be here always. Yeah, so the precautionary principle is not like a term that, we just know it is, but it is there, but we, need not build on it. No, we have to build on it, yeah. But actually the calculations may not be the most important, and I'm saying it, from the perspective of the person who, for, 15 years made these calculations, but I think there are other ways how to help the nature that can be at least equally of the same importance as bringing some new complex quantitatively based results for the practice. Yeah.
Thank you. Jan, you wanted to comment it, but I think Kateřina maybe covered that? No. Yeah.
I have 2 points. These comments are right. We use a continuous model that can use or capture the marginal changes. That's right. But of course, the further step is a discrete type of modeling with the shocks and also with thresholds. That is one point. And the other was, the natural capital is like long-term involvement. So it's the evolution of ecosystem assets is long-term, and these processes long-term are captured, for example, in soil processes. And on the other hand, the economic part, they are more dynamic and more quick, like human intervention, like harvest and so on. So long-term dynamic is in ecological part, simply said, and the quick dynamic is in economic part.
Thank you, Jan. And I think you had a question too?
Yeah, thank you. It's one small comment, if I may, and a very short question. It's amazing what you are doing there, and the website you have developed and the tool. And scientifically wise, it's amazing. Policy wise, I'm just frustrated because, you know, we need all of us to enter all this fast to convince that, you know, there is a value there. And this is really frustrating. Regarding the question was on the end users of this model. Who do you expect that they will use the model?
Yeah, thank you for the comment and for the question. When I went through the literature again and again, you could read in year 2009 articles that stated, okay, so now we have the concept of ecosystem services for some time, so it's time to deliver. And I was like, okay, so if you have some other complex topics, will you expect them to deliver after like 10 years of development? Whether, you know, ecosystem services is like basically the whole world, yeah, it's everything. There are like all the interconnections, not just like among the natural part, but also in the socio-economic part, and this is so complex. Yeah, I get your frustration. Yeah, and I also think that based on the concept, we can just build maybe towards something that is already in the legislations, which maybe are more like expert approaches. So you can have some calculations, but in general, you can use some qualitative assessments which you use in the administrative discretions up to now normally. Yeah. So I think there might be some like shift needed into how we perceive the concept of ecosystem services, because most people that I know, including the practitioners, think that this is something that brings together in a quantitative way very many, particular links about what is going on in nature and between the nature and the society, and I think this is not it. Yeah, this is just like a misconception. So ecosystem services for me are also just one of the link from the process, from the ecosystem asset to what happens with the values, and then back again, and then there are drivers, I didn't talk about them, which affect the processes and not the values, not the ecosystem services, but mostly they affect the processes. So actually you are talking about a complex and not only about some like final ecosystem services that you would want to sum up so that you have some value which is big, at least so big that it rules out the other competing interest of question. Yeah.
Thank you very much once again to Kateřina and Jan. And now we have the last presentation of this sub-block about the ecosystem services, and I would like to ask the last who asked the question, and it is Savvas Zotos from Cyprus, and he will have a presentation about the project Live Pandoteira, and this is from Natura 2000 Conservation to Ecosystem Services Assessment in Cyprus. So, Savvas.
Thank you, and I promise that I'm not going to ask questions to myself. Let me start by thanking you all for the invitation. It's thrilled to be here. I'll try to be quick, to leave some space for questions. I hope I'll manage it. So, Savvas Zotos is my name. I come from the Open University of Cyprus to present the IP Live project Pandoteira. I'm going to tell you a bit on this project and then on the ecosystem services. It's a part of the project that we're running. But first of all, let me introduce you Cyprus. It's the third largest island in the Mediterranean Sea. It's the most beautiful island. We have 300 days a year of sun, so please come and visit us. The live IP Pandoteira is the largest project live that we had in the island. It's a very ambitious project. It's difficult to manage. We have a lot of things to say positive on this project, and of course we have some areas that we will need to further work on this. Why we apply for this project? Of course, the first and perhaps most important, to fill our knowledge gap. We have a lot of gaps, unfortunately. We're a small country. We entered the European Union in 2004. The capacity in the island is very limited. So we have a lot of knowledge gap, and we're trying through this project to fill this gap. We need to improve the governance on the project, mainly on the private land. I'm going to speak about private and public land in a while. Find a way to evaluate ecosystem services. That's a huge discussion, a large debate. Why do we need to evaluate ecosystem services? But let me just say for clarity, we're doing it at this point to tick the box because we need to do it. Although it's a huge debate, you need to map them. It's crazy. Tackle the invasive alien species, improve the conservation status of species importance, and of course, capacity building, information, and effective monitoring of the projects. Regarding the project as a whole, it's a 10-year project. It started in 2019. It will finish in 2029. It's, the leader is the Department of Environment, and pretty much inside this project, we have gathered all the big stakeholders in the island. We have the 4 related to the environment government departments. We have 4 universities. We don't have the only 4 public universities, 3 public universities and a private one. The 3 main NGOs and 3 main companies in the island. We're a small country. So we gather all of them to help us produce this project and improve the conservation status of habitat and species of community importance. I will present the preparatory actions, the A actions, as we say them, and of course, every action preparatory is continued by concrete conservation actions. So the first thing was to map the habitats in the Natura 2000 areas. We don't have them, or we didn't have them. Now we have them. We map them. There are 40 different habitat types. We have mapped the distribution of 14 plants and 19 animal taxa, including bats, reptiles, insects. This was the first time that we tried and we successfully managed to map all those species and habitat. Two very important actions was the management of the Natura 2000 areas in the private land. In regards to the management in the public forests, the majority of the forests in Cyprus are belonging to the public, to the government, and it's very easily manageable. But for the private land, it was a mess. We were going to villages, discuss with the locals. We're here for the Natura 2000 areas. What are those? The Natura 2000 areas? Are those the things that the European Commission said we cannot build on? Yes, okay. So in Cyprus, the discussion with the private sector is a bit difficult because as they see it, the protection of the land is destroying the opportunity to develop their land. And that's a serious problem. We haven't managed to resolve it. It's something we're working on still, and for the next couple of decades. Of course, we have developed conservation action plans for the species, and we're running them. We try to study the ecological regime of some specific habitat and specific species. We have put some camera traps in order to identify the habits or the nesting areas of protected species. We have installed GPS collars on cormorants to see how they behave and where they nest. A very important thing is that we try to identify the death on the road kills by the secondary poisoning from rodenticides. This was very important. We have found that all the owls that we find dead on the roads, they have rodenticides inside them. So we believe that it's a secondary poisoning that lead them to go close to the roads and then hit by cars. And of course, some other nesting projects for important species. We have developed a framework for mapping and assessing the ecosystem services. I'm going to talk about this framework in a while. Map the invasive alien species, both of community interest and not community interest. For example, in the your right, you see the map of Akakea salina. It's not of community interest, but it's pretty much everywhere in the island. Capacity building activities and some very interesting projects to identify the fishery management inside and outside Natura 2000 areas. This was very important. The fishermen are actually stakeholders that are in line with the department. They acknowledge the importance of the Natura 2000 network and the habitats for the species that they are collecting. So those was very, very interesting data coming out of those monitoring schemes. The C actions, I'm not going to discuss on them because pretty much is the A actions, but actually taking place. And the second part of the presentation, you see that I'm very fast. The second part of the presentation is regarding the assessment of the ecosystem services. It's a mess. We tried to put it down as more smooth as we could in order to deliver something that we will be proud of it. And of course, what we have, it's still work in progress, so I will appreciate your feedback and comments. And of course, it's debatable scientifically. So we have 62 Natura 2000 areas in the island. Although I call it the island because Cyprus, it's an island, the north part of the island is outside our jurisdiction. Although it's part of Cyprus, we cannot control it. So currently, we don't have Natura 2000 areas on that part. So all the Natura 2000 areas are on the south parts. Because we wanted to work on those areas and we could not work in 62 areas simultaneously, we collected and sampled 9 of those areas in the left down map with the blue that are Natura 2000 areas that we believe represent pretty much the whole diversity of habitats in the island. We have some coastal areas, we have some forested areas, we have some river basins. We tried to collect samples that will represent the diversity of the island. And we took all the governmental departments that were responsible, and we separate them in groups. The Department of Forest, for the forest and shrublands, the Department of Environment for the frigana and the steppes, agricultural ecosystem were given to one of the universities that we have in the island, the Cyprus University of Technology, that is dedicated to agroecosystems. Aquatic ecosystems, we took them as Open University of Cyprus in collaboration with the Water Development Department, and coastal and marine ecosystem to the Fishery Department. Of course, those were the leaders of the groups. Within the groups, we had not only partners of the project, but pretty much all the relevant stakeholders in the island. We're a small island, we know everyone. It was easy to put them together in the same table and start discussing with them. What we tried to do is to determine the ecosystem services per ecosystem type, identify and select the indicators that will allow us to map the service, and collect data in order to create a national database on indicators and ecosystem services. And what we wanted at the end was to estimate the supply and provide not only maps of ecosystem services, but maps of the monetary value of ecosystem services. And the first time that I said that in front of the audience with scientists, I mean, the debate started and they will start shouting at me, come on, you cannot do that. And we said we'd do it, so we're trying to do it the best way we can. Okay, so for ecosystem types, we needed to develop the typology. Because now we have the habitat maps, we said, let's start by the habitat maps. And we do it backwards. We start with the habitat maps, you see here, the habitat, and based on those habitats, we put them on categories of MAES, Mapping and Assessing Ecosystem Services protocol, of level 2 and level 1 of MAES. This is, okay, at this point, at least for us, is the holy grail of how we're going to put some values on the ecosystem services. I'm taking an example of one of the Natura 2000 area, the Agamas area. In your left, you see the habitat types mapped, and in your right, you see the ecosystem types map. So from the habitats, we went to the ecosystem type, and thereon we're going to add values on those ecosystem type. In order to add values, the first thing that we did was that we gather all the scientists that are working on the island on ecosystem services, and not working on, but understood what ecosystem services is. And you can see there the number 10. That's the number of scientists we have in the island that understand, or at least understood. We collect them and try to ask them to put a number from 0 to 5 on every different ecosystem service on the habitat that they are more familiar with. So it was just a simple scoring. But based on this scoring, we did an indicator of species analysis, and we pretty much now know what we already knew before, the most important ecosystem service for the groups of ecosystem types that we have developed. Based on this scoring, we developed the maps. So we said that for service X, we have this kind of ecosystem types and this scoring, so there is a mean or an average of this value. So here you see the values for the provision ecosystem services in the left, for the regulating services in the middle, and for cultural ecosystem services in your right. And through a simple tool in ArcGIS, we have done a hotspot analysis, and we identified the pretty much hotspot and cold spot of each type of ecosystem services. And this is just for us to understand, to have a first impression of what's happening in every Natura 2000 areas. Then we had to identify the indicators to assess every ecosystem services. That was a serious problem for us, because although there are data, most of the time they lack spatial resolution, so you don't know exactly where this data is coming from, and sometimes you don't have access to the data. The Department of Environment asked from the Kateřina department for information on the private land, and they said, no, we're not giving them to you, it's ours. So we have this kind of issues in the islands. But despite that, we give it a shot. We have found some indicators, and we start developing some maps. What you see here, it's one marine Natura 2000 areas. We have information from the Department of Fisheries on the fishing data, so the amount of catch that the fishermen have, and in different kind of species. So we have the number of species and the biomass of the species. And based on those information, we have the habitats. And based on those informations, we will try to provide the ecosystem service 1.1.6.1, that is the food from wild animals provisioning, through the selling price of the 2024. So this is a way for us to map the service, not the catchment of fish. Through some other data from census, species census, we're going to use the diversity index to produce maps from another services, regulating services. Through the tree cover density, we are hoping, we haven't done it yet, we are hoping to find through the percentages of land cover density to have regulation services of wind protection. And that's for the cultivated area. we have all the cultivations in all the parcels of the island that are funded by CAP. So through those areas, we will try to produce the provisioning services by the cultivated crops. But the most important thing, at least the thing that we haven't yet addressed, is the monetary value. How we're going to provide value to those services. So I would like to discuss the tool that you have developed in a while. We're using ecosystem services valuation database that has some numbers, and we're going to try to use some of those numbers to put them on the maps that we have developed. And of course, at the same time, do exactly the opposite. So for the services that we have data, try to provide our data through publications to the ESVD database. That's all from me. Thank you for the time. I forgot to add, and thank you, slide. My apologies.
Thank you, and as well as in other presentations, we have a space for your questions or comments. If there is no any.
Now, come on, you have questions.
You can approach Savvas during the coffee break then.
Okay, coffee break, thank you.
Thank you very much.